Hey kids, thanks for joining me in the garage again today. We're going to be replacing something that I've been needing to replace for a little while now, my Harbor Freight welding table. This thing is wobbly, it's bent up a little bit, and just needs to be replaced, so let's make something new. So I've got some hardware here, and I've got some casters. These are 5-inch casters. Each one of these I think are rated to like 400 or 500 pounds. So about 18 to 2,000 pounds is what this will hold for this welding table hardware. And kind of what I've done here, I did a little prototype of how these casters are going to be adjustable. And so I've got some nuts or bolts here that are 7/8 inch by 9 pitched thread, and then some bolts for those. And that way I'll be able to make this adjustable, and then I can lock it off. And you'll see as I build this here, I've got a plate, there's a nut welded on the inside of this. And so that way this will screw in nice and even, and then I can lock it down with that nut on the outside. So, let's go over, we'll pull some metal out and we'll get to cutting. This being the first real project with several of the new tools in this new garage, there were a lot of things that I learned. First, having recently purchased an abrasive chop saw, I quickly discovered that the blade that came with the saw deflected way too much. I was making the underlying table structure using 45-degree cuts, and those cuts came out very uneven due to that. I ended up getting another type of higher-end chop saw blade that made the cutting up of the remaining pieces that I needed much easier. Second, when starting a project like this, it's always a good idea to make up a set of plans. This will give you an idea of the amounts and types of materials you'll need ahead of time, so you don't end up wasting time making multiple trips to your supplier to get what you need. Your plans don't have to be anything fancy. A drawing on a napkin can do just fine, but it helps to know where you're headed before you start. In my case, I drew up a detailed set of plans in order to figure out what lengths and dimension I was going to need, so that I knew I had everything before I started. Starting on the underlying table structure, I found that the old Harbor Freight table was just too small to handle how large this piece was going to be. As you can see, I ended up tacking this up entirely on the floor. I was setting the pieces on some 1-inch square tubing to give it some space underneath, so I was able to use the new 8-inch Fireball Mega Square to get everything perfectly squared up. Starting a project like this with a nice, perfectly square base will make the rest of the project that much easier to put together. Taking your time and making sure you have everything lined up to meet that goal is well worth the effort spent. This was one of, if not the reason, I wanted to replace the old welding table to make future projects easier to get done and get done right. I added a crossbar to the center of the underlying table structure here in order to give it some strength for holding the 3/8 plate top. This was probably overkill, but in my book, overkill is just fine. I've been really happy with how this Harbor Freight welder has been operating, though admittedly it is my first welder, so I do have some confirmation bias. Also, as the saying goes, anyone with a welder and a grinder can make a weld look good. The Fireball Tools 8-inch aluminum Mega Square that I picked up really made getting this table put together easier than even I'd hoped. Overall, at most, I was off less than a 1/16 of an inch from being square on all the dimensions, top to bottom. I'm really happy that I made that investment. If it wasn't already obvious, this was a multi-day project to get put together. Though I didn't change anything on the plans I set up, I really did overestimate how quickly I was going to be able to get everything welded together. I imagine that would have been even longer had I not made plans in the first place. Onto the caster assembly. To figure out how I was going to be able to level these casters on the uneven garage floor, I watched a variety of different YouTube videos. Unfortunately, I don't recall exactly which video it was that had a similar type of leveling caster design as what I ended up building. Leave a comment below if you've seen it recently so I can give them a shout out for their excellent idea. The drill press really got some good use on this project as well. It didn't make a flawless performance, but I would have hated to have to hand drill all these pieces. I think I do need to get a higher quality chuck for it to do it some justice though. I got a link here where you can check out the series I did on rebuilding it. That was a fun project. I went back and forth on whether I wanted to have the nut on the caps of the bottom of the legs on the inside or the outside of the square tube. After doing the mock-up you saw at the beginning of the video, I was convinced that having them on the inside wasn't going to cause an issue. It was mostly a concern of whether the welds were going to hold up over time, and I think they turned out pretty solid. Coming to this point of putting the casters on the legs of the table had taken several days. It was nice to finally get the casters on and have this project really start to take shape as a welding table. As I dragged this 3/8" plate out though, it reminded me there was still some heavy lifting to do. I got this 3/8" plate from my local metal supplier as a drop, so it was not in the perfect condition. For the price though, I couldn't really beat what I was getting for my money. It's 3 feet by 4 feet, and at almost 15.5 pounds per square foot, this weighed in just under 200 pounds. This is going to be a pretty stout table. The titanium unlimited 200 welder that I have is only rated at the thicknesses of 1/4 inch. It's funny though, looking at the maximum settings on it and then what you can actually turn the knobs to, it seems it could possibly handle thicker material. It seemed to glue this 3/8" plate onto this 1/8" walled square tubing I used on the frame just fine. As you can see, I put some 2 to 3 inch welds all around the edges on the underside, and they penetrated this plate just fine. All right, as you can see, I got the tabletop cleaned all up. It turned out really good. I just hit it with a rope wire wheel here, and then hit it with, after that, a polycarbide abrasive wheel. And it cleaned up really good, then just wiped it down with some good old WD-40, the rag, and turned out really good. I'm really happy the way this looks. It's a nice solid table. So the final thing I need to do is, off camera, I actually put some more braces in between on the bottom here. And so now I've got a shelf. I wasn't sure if, what I put down there was I have 16 gauge steel for the bottom shelf, and I wasn't sure if it was gonna be, if it was gonna sag a bunch when I put that in there. So I just added some more bracing. So I got to pop this thing up. First, we'll grab this piece of steel here. Already got it all marked up everywhere. And so I'll have about a 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch overlap on each edge. It won't go all the way out to the edge of these supports. So let me get my mask on, and we'll just hit this with the cutoff wheel. Even with all the storage I have in the new garage, it always seems that I could use some more. Mostly I'll be storing the metal chop saw and the plasma cutter under here for when I'm not using them on a project. Otherwise, some extra storage is always welcome. All right, that looks pretty good. I think what I'll do is hit these corners, and then I'll tip the table up and then weld along the bottom underneath here as well. That way this won't move around, won't rattle or anything like that once I do that. So let's get that done. I was a bit nervous about welding the 16 gauge sheet metal since I had blown through a few of the welds when trying to dial in my settings. Turns out it welded up just fine. One of the things I did for this table is I tried to get it so it'll line up with my workbench over here as far as height wise. And so you can see right there, got to raise the back just a little bit, I suppose, but that's pretty much right on. And I can just easily raise this back by twisting these here. And bring the front down a little bit. There we go. Lock these casters. Nice thing about the casters is when you lock them, it also locks them from swiveling around. All right, well, there you have it. I hope you enjoyed me doing the build here on this new welding table. I'm gonna load up the bottom now and kind of button things up here in the garage, get this mess kind of cleaned up. So hope you enjoyed watching, hope you learned something. You know, hit that thumbs up if you did. If you're here for the first time, consider subscribing. Thanks for watching. Keep on wrenching.